Welcome, everyone. My name is Aileen Gemma Smith, and I'd like to welcome you to this special edition of AWS Community Voices with AWS Heroes. I serve as the head of developer relations for Americas and Online, and my pronouns are she and her. I'm really excited to share this session with you because we have AWS heroes joining us from all over the world. For folks that are tuning in that may not be familiar with AWS heroes, basically, the Heroes program is something that recognizes individuals globally who go above and beyond to share their AWS knowledge with others, to be leaders in tech communities, and to be advocates for all things AWS. We're proud and honored to have over 200 heroes that hail from 42 countries. And it is my distinct privilege today to have 4 heroes, again, from all over the world, to share with us a little bit about their experiences of reInvent and what we're seeing so far. And it's a lot about community voices. So this absolutely is a live session, and I encourage folks who are tuning in to share your questions with the hashtag at AWS On Air. So let me start first with just a mini world tour. Because we've got Peter Hansens, who is a serverless hero coming into us from Sydney, Australia. We've got Felipe Barreto, who is a community hero who's coming into us from Brazil. We've got Vlad Unescu, who's a container hero coming into us from Romania. And we've also got Lynn Langit, a data hero who's tuning in from the US. I'm here based in Seattle, and I'd love for everyone in the panel to go around, give a little bit of an introduction to yourself, and share about the work that you're doing. Peter, shall we kick off in Australia?
Sounds great. So yeah, like Aileen said, my name's Peter Hansens. I'm a serverless hero here in Sydney, Australia. A bit about my background. I started off with AWS probably about 5 years ago. A cloud guru was my entry point into getting a bunch of cloud certifications and the like, and never looked back since. I run the Sydney Serverless Meetup and the Sydney Data Engineering Meetup. I've run a bunch of community conferences here in Australia and really enjoy talking all things cloud. You can follow me on Twitter at Pete Hansens.
Wonderful. All right, moving on from serverless to containers. Vlad, if you would introduce yourself.
Hey, everybody. I'm Vlad. I'm a container hero, as Aileen just said. In my day-to-day work, I'm an independent consultant. I like to joke that I'm a professional mistake avoider. So if I am a bit rough or showcasing some very sharp edges of some services today, I'm not bashing on AWS. I just know that some people are going to make a database out of Route 53 and somebody's going to put it in production. Oh, and my pronouns are he and him.
All right. Moving on to Brazil. Felipe?
Hey everyone, pleasure to be here. I'm based in Rio, Brazil, and been helping build community starting in Rio. Right now we have a great ecosystem in Brazil and also in Latin America with several heroes, and it's been a huge pleasure to be part of this. I got into AWS working with a consulting partner and just started building communities and don't feel like stopping so soon. So it's a pleasure being with everyone from all over the world.
Awesome. And rounding out with Lynn, who it is my distinct privilege to have in this panel. Lynn is one of the longest serving AWS heroes and is also a data hero. Lynn?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to this panel. Look forward to some spirited discussion. As we were preparing, we don't all agree, so hopefully that our perspectives can benefit the audience. Yeah, I've had the pleasure to be a hero for a while now. I'm an independent cloud architect and educator. Probably recognized from my education work. I have a number of courses on LinkedIn Learning. Probably the most interesting related to this discussion has a companion GitHub repo, which I'm literally in the process of updating as I try out the new services. It's called Hello AWS Data Services, so all open source. People can find me on Twitter, Lynn Langit. Also, the perspective I bring will be across vendors because I'm not employed by AWS and I do work on some of the competitive clouds. That perspective might be interesting to some of the listeners, and I'm going to include that in the discussion today.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, let's get started. 3 hours of Andy's keynote. That was amazing and inspiring. Obviously, a little bit different than before since we're not all sitting there watching live. But what are key takeaways? What are we all excited about or surprised about that we heard?
For me, it was all of the serverless announcements. We saw so much in pre-invent, and so my thoughts were, wow, could there be much more to announce? And then I was just really taken aback by all of the huge announcements, like the new space allocation, basically tripling the size of the Lambdas to 10 gig of RAM and 6 virtual CPUs, 1 millisecond billing, and Lambda container support. I thought they were huge announcements. Not to mention all the other incredible announcements that I'm sure the other heroes will chat about.
Lynn?
Yeah, so in my production work, I work on genomic scale data pipelines. So it's been a really interesting year. Prior to this year, my clients were mostly doing cancer research, but this year, most of them have added or converted to COVID research. So anything in the cloud that can accelerate the science is really, really interesting to me. I've long been a big fan of the move towards serverless data platforms. So probably the most interesting thing was Aurora Serverless V2. Can't wait to get my hands on that. I just was in a briefing on AWS Glue Elastic Views and the use cases that you guys were sharing around, I call it extending DynamoDB, talking about indexing DynamoDB, aggregating data from DynamoDB, in my opinion, making DynamoDB more usable. Seems like an area where my customers could really benefit. I'm also really interested in benchmarking your chips around machine learning. I do extensive work with TensorFlow and use Google's TPUs. So I've got customers that are working at extreme scale. I mean, I'll just tell you, one of my customers is putting in 45 terabytes per day into the cloud. 45 terabytes per day. That's why I say genomic scale. It's a really, really huge scale. So the announcements around data were really interesting. The compute wars, as I call them, I think we'll get into as we get into this call more. Those are interesting to me, but secondarily, because I work mostly on the data platforms.
You want to answer, Vlad, or should I go before you?
Please go before me.
Yeah. One thing that I really liked about the keynote, not just in the data part, is how many times Andy used the word groundbreaking. So many new launches that were really groundbreaking. And one thing that I really like compared to other years is that so many services that are already so used, and not just in the keynote, but in the launches like S3, EBS, and big improvements in services that are already used really well. So that was something really big. But also something that's kind of scary because it's so many new options of things to do that we really got to be careful and let's study, let's research and understand what's the best use case. So I guess when you have every day more options and more applications, you have to be more sure what's the best practices and what's the right way to do. So quite exciting, but also quite scary of how many new launches it was this year.
Absolutely. And Vlad, I know you want to bookend out here.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Felipe on maturing services. I think that was the big theme, or at least it was for me. For containers, we did get a couple announcements. ECS Anywhere, EKS Anywhere, and Proton are definitely some very interesting announcements. But they are not for everybody. Not everybody is running containers on-prem at edge. Not everybody is doing 5G. On the other hand, during the keynote and in pre-event, we got a lot of other container releases that were very, very interesting. Things like managed add-ons, things like finally support for spot instances in managed node groups. I know there was a lot of demand for that. So that was very interesting for me. And if anybody is passionate about containers and not following the public roadmap on GitHub, please look into that, subscribe to issues that are of interest to you, because when AWS releases a solution for that, they do close the issue, they link out to the blog, and you get an email from GitHub letting you know about that. That said, how should I put this? I am very excited, but I am also aware of AWS's past with open source. I very much love the new focus and new AWS that is open source. Open sourcing the EKS distribution, for example, is a huge step and something that I would never have seen AWS do a while ago. And I love seeing that new direction, and I very much look forward to how that is going to play out.
Kind of following along with that, of course, another interesting release that is going to be open sourced, which was surprising, is Babel Fish. Mm-hmm. So a Babel Fish, if people didn't catch it, is a translation layer, as best I understand it. Because again, I haven't tried it yet. I listened to it yesterday, just like you did, on Aurora, that would allow for a smoother transition from SQL Server. This is really interesting to me because way back when, I actually worked for Microsoft, wrote 3 books on SQL Server, and used to do, I mean, this was like 10 years ago, but used to do a lot of work with it. So yeah. Just out of curiosity's sake, because in my data lake world, I'm not actually using very many databases anymore, but we're all nerds, right? And so just out of curiosity, I'm going to have to try Babel Fish out. And when you guys announced that you were open sourcing it, as Vlad was saying, I was actually surprised and happy. So, more like that, please.
Absolutely. And I think I want to come back to something that Felipe said, which is now one of the things that we really lean into is expanding the concept of possible. And with that kind of great privilege comes great responsibility, and now saying, okay, but what makes the most and the best sense for the types of problems or the types of workloads that I have? Because there are a lot of choices out there, and sometimes that nuance really matters. And I think, and part of what I'm really excited to hear from all of you in this conversation is, as heroes, we're sort of leaders in the community in sharing, here's different approaches and ways that things can get done. So I'd love to hear perspectives from what you're seeing in the communities that you support or in the work that you're doing, where how do we navigate through when there is so many choices, understanding, but what makes the most sense for my particular context, which may be different than someone else.
A bit on that, Aileen. I actually, before for this, preparing to this, I had a talk with the other heroes in Latin America, like Marcelo, Chico, Damian, and Gabo, to get their views too. I mean, for the Latin America AWS community, what's interesting, and it was quite interesting because we all had quite the same view that this year, more than the others, we believe that we look at AWS every year less as an infrastructure provider, because of like more solutions provider and specific services for basically anyone, anywhere. Like at the beginning, we wouldn't have like specific services like the Connect solution for call centers or things like that. And like Andy mentioned in his keynotes, like if you're selling bananas, we want to have a solution for you. Yeah. And I guess that's something really cool that, Amazon comes from the everything store. So now you have like everything options in the cloud and every day more solutions and specific for other use cases. And the big challenge, is actually studying and learning and having an overview of the entire solution. And I guess it's really cool to have a hero community that if you have challenges with serverless, you want to study more, let's see what Peter has to say with data. Let's look at Lynn. So have a big overview and count on the community of specialists to try to be more specific in what you want to look more.
Yeah. And I love the fact that we have such a diverse group of heroes all over the world, hailing from 42 different countries. So Peter, if I can turn to you, what are the responses that you're seeing from your colleagues and peers in Australia and New Zealand region?
I think there's a lot of excitement of how AWS are honing in on job roles. Like, for instance, if you're a data engineer, it feels like you can live a lot more of your life in the Glue ecosystem. Or if you're a data scientist or machine learning engineer, you can live more of your life in SageMaker. There's a lot more feature completeness where you can do sort of, there's been the feature store announcements, and I think there's with SageMaker and there's, I think, Glue Data Brew and obviously Lynn's touched on the materialized views with Glue as well. So
Yeah.
I think so many great announcements, so that really allow you to do all that you want within a particular ecosystem within AWS, and I think that's really positive, because it helps I guess particular job roles focus on a particular set of services as opposed to the full gamut of AWS services.
Yeah, so you can focus on the problems that you really want to solve instead of all of the uptake to kind of getting there. Vlad, I'm eager to hear from you. What have you been hearing from folks in the container community so far?
The container community is a bit more different because we are cross-cloud and everybody needs Kubernetes, and there is a lot of hype and a lot of confusion. As Felipe was saying, AWS now has a lot of services. Last count it was more than 175. With the announcements from here, I think we're getting very, very close to 200. And that is a challenge. That is something that is difficult both for newcomers. Okay, I want to run a container. Where do I put it? Do I put it in Lightsail? Do I use it with ECS? Do I go for EKS? Because everybody needs Kubernetes, and don't you know that you got to run Kubernetes? And it is something that is difficult, even for, as I said, newcomers, but also for people that have been doing AWS for a while, that have been working with AWS for a while, because we got to stay up to date on this, and we have to see how things are changing. A great example of this is managed nodes for EKS. If you're not familiar with it, managed nodes is AWS takes care of your EC2 instances for EKS. It's absolutely lovely. AWS does security updates, patches, AMI updates, handles the rollout for you. It is something that saved a lot of time for a lot of operations teams. But you gotta stay up to date with that. You've gotta see if that is a fit for you. If you wanted to use spot instances, you couldn't have done that until a couple days ago. Now you can. That is and remains a challenge, but I love seeing how active people are both on Twitter and in different Slack workspaces. The community is real. All of us are heroes, are in there. We're chatting all the time. Feel free to tag us. We're a friendly bunch. So it's definitely a lot of excitement and confusion at the same time, which as a geek is the best place to be.
So I actually have a question for Vlad and really everybody. So I built a couple of container solutions, but I try to go directly to serverless whenever I can. So I'm not as experienced as the rest of you guys in this. And frankly, I built more of them on a competitor cloud. So I used raw Kubernetes, and it was horrible. I would swear, but probably get bleeped off this. It was horrible. It took just ridiculously too long. And this was a couple of years ago. I tried ECS at the time, didn't find a good value in it. And I'm really trying to, understand this new capability of we can Dockerize Lambda. I've seen this in a competitor cloud, specifically GCP Cloud Run, and I've used it and I've liked it. But let's say I want to start with a containerized solution. Where do I start in Amazon, and why do I start there? And I know it depends, but let's just take a use case that I work with, which is burstable data lakes. So they have a chain of data processes together. Where would I start? And I'm really genuinely curious for all three of you to answer, because I think you have more knowledge than I do about this.
Yeah, I do a lot of designing around stuff. Again, professional mistake avoider. It's my job to know not only what we should build today, but what's gonna work for the coming years, because you don't wanna rip out the solution and re-implement it because you're hitting a pain point. And where do I start is, as I said, a problem, and it's going to remain a problem, even though we are all trying to put out a lot of content to fix that. I'm working on a series of fixing that. I would first of all say, if you can start with serverless, start with serverless. I know I'm container hero. I should have said start with Kubernetes. I'm not gonna. Again, I'm trying to follow a code of conduct. I'm not going to use strong words about Kubernetes, but we'll get there. If you are starting something that is greenfield, a fully new project, starting something from scratch, it makes a lot of sense to start with serverless. It's pay-per-use. You get to offload a lot of effort to AWS. AWS is a partner for you. You can use their solutions and their services, so you build less. AWS has a lot of skilled people that manage that for you. So you definitely should start there. And then, based on certain things, you can move to containers and maybe even to Kubernetes. But before we go into that, I'm going to let Peter share his view on serverless.
Thanks, Vlad. I think there's so many parameters to take in for this particular one, and Lynn, I know you're underselling your abilities in this area. I know you've got a very deep knowledge, but I'm interested to know what the parameters are to differentiating between a workload between the Lambda container solution and say running a container on Fargate. Perhaps it's an event-driven architecture that sort of tips you towards Lambda versus Fargate, and perhaps it's also size constraints as well. And perhaps you can break up some of the size of the sort of data processing that you're doing with with your particular data lake workload, and whether it's kind of can be S3 event triggered and the like. So I think that's something to consider. But I also know that you work with tremendous volumes of data as well, so perhaps cost plays into it, and so then perhaps something a bit more ECS with spot instances, and then there's just the ease of rolling it out considerations. I think perhaps Lambda containers with fronted by an API gateway potentially could be the quickest way to get up and running. It'd be great to have a play around once it rolls out. Over to you, Felipe.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I mean, we're talking about containers and serverless. I couldn't not agree with the two heroes. So I definitely agree with you both. But the thing I really believe in every scenario is it really depends on the workload, and I guess that's why we still have jobs, because it really depends on the size, the price, what is more critical, what is a priority for you to think of, what's the best solution for that specific challenge. And that goes back to what we said before. I mean, with so many options, what's the best way to go with that? I do like serverless. I'm more of a serverless person than a container person. So I usually start, but I completely agree that there are some use cases that it makes more sense for you to go to containers. But on that, I think one of the craziest launches that everyone was like, wow, was the running containers on Lambda. And we even talked with Vlad a little bit yesterday about what's so interesting about it and what's so scary about it. Because in the first moment, I was like, wow, this is really cool. And then I think people are going to make a bit of mistakes using this and won't use it for the right use case. So I wanted to make the question for the three of you. I mean, what do you think are the positives in this launch, and what do you think are the things that people should worry and pay attention for them to use it the right way?
Well, I can jump in really quick. Obviously, when you control a container, you control a container. And what I've seen people do wrong is security problems. Just the really oh duh thing is you get a base container from something like Docker Hub, and you don't scan it, and it has a bunch of stuff in it that's undesirable. A lot of the companies now, and I think Amazon does this, but I'm not sure. If you use their container registry, they actually scan the containers for you, which is a great value add that a lot of my customers didn't even realize until I told them. I was like, look, you should use your cloud vendor's container because it's going to, the latency's registry, because it's less, and then they're going to scan it for you. So I think, like you said, people can shoot themselves in the foot, because the biggest myth in my experience is that containers are easy. They're not. And to me, there should be a business reason to use them. I, like everybody else on here, goes to serverless first, because it's your VM serverless, and then if there's a reason, you go to containers. But the question is now, given the ecosystem of Amazon, to me, really it is, would I run Kubernetes on Amazon? That's what it really comes down to. Because in the past, if I would run containers, it would have been ECS. And now my question really is Kubernetes, now that's going to be open source, again, given the fact I work multi-cloud, because it's more natural to work where Kubernetes came from in the past has been. So that's really the question that I have. Like if I have a customer for which Kubernetes is a fit, is the ecosystem mature enough? And it's more a rhetorical question. I know you may not know. We haven't seen the open source code for EKS yet, but I feel like it might be.
Vlad?
It will be. As heroes, we get preview. I'm not going to break NDAs because I'm a responsible hero, but they are open sourcing the components that make EKS. That means that if you're running, say, a custom Kubernetes cluster on AWS, you can now use components tested by AWS for you. We've seen that impact what was it? I think it was Kubernetes 1.12 where AWS was late releasing it. Because of the awesome public roadmap, we got visibility into that. An AWS engineer commented, hey, we don't feel like 1.12 something is ready. We're waiting for the next patch release. Google pushed it to their experimental channel and then had to roll back because some clusters were getting corrupted. AWS testing there was a very big advantage, and now you get to take advantage of that. That is something that's amazing. But going back to the initial question, what would I use and when? We all agree, start with serverless. Seriously, if you can start from zero, from scratch, start with serverless, it is going to be so much easier, and you get to concentrate on actual business problems instead of, oh no, I've got to do an AMI upgrade because there's a CV for something. That's vital. It's something that is very important, but is not bringing you direct business value. Well, it is if you're getting breached, but hopefully you're doing that. That said, if you cannot use Lambdas and now Lambda containers are very, very good for event-driven workflows. If you gotta consume messages off an SQS queue, Lambda is just going to invoke a Lambda container for you now. That is awesome. You don't have to write any code to read messages from SQS, to do polling, to do things like that. It's handled for you. Lambdas are event-driven containers. They are there if you're doing event-driven stuff, and you get a lot of integrations, a lot of AWS tie-ins with other AWS services. That said, Lambda is limiting. You can only run for at most 15 minutes. Some people have jobs longer than that. Lambda is a tiny bit more expensive. It is very much worth it because, again, you don't have to stress about AMIs. You don't have to stress about scanning your containers. You don't have to stress about anything. That's awesome. And why I'm so afraid of Lambda containers is that an enterprise is going to see, and this keynote is going to say, yes, we also need to reinvent. We're going to take our legacy app, we're going to shove it in a Docker container that is 40-something gigs. We're then going to do some very weird work to get it under 10 gigs, and we're going to put it in Lambda and reinvent done. We are now serverless. We are cloud native. We've checked all the boxes. And like, you're not getting any of the advantages. You're getting the marketing advantage, props to you, but not that. So why would you not run Lambdas? Again, cost and needing more knobs that you want to turn. Maybe you want to scale faster. Maybe you at huge scale, as Lynn was saying, you really, really need to be aware of the cost. And EC2 spots, Fargate spot are very large cost savings that you can implement. And that is one of the reasons that people move from Lambdas to containers. It is cheaper for certain workflows, but that only becomes visible for you when you reach a certain scale. Serverless gets you very, very, very fast. Now, why would you use? Yeah.
No, I was gonna just a quick thing where you said when we talked to my team from my company about this, the first reaction from our container specialist was, wow, we're going to get monolithic serverless containers. So a lot of that, like you said, the people, you got to use it right. So it's a big challenge. Completely agree with you, Vlad.
And there are people doing it right. Ken is running Ruby on Rails app and Lambdas, and they do wonders in there. It is something that is best, but a lot of engineering effort is going into that.
So I want to ask Peter, the serverless hero, I'm going to put him on the spot, about the millisecond Lambda billing, because I know that you and all your friends out there in Oz that are doing A Cloud Guru are truly some of the best in the world at Lambda. And I want to learn from you because I know a little bit about Lambda and cost optimization, as we've been talking about, but I can't kind of get my head around what would you have to do to really get the best benefit for millisecond Lambda billing. Like, it sounds good, but and I hope I'm not putting you on the spot. I just assume you're going to have something to say here.
I didn't prep anything for this question, but I've got a couple of
That's okay.
ideas that I can give you off the cuff. Instantiating your connections outside of your handler, so that in between, because effectively a Lambda function is kind of like a container, if you will, behind the scenes, and it just, every time it gets invoked, it can reuse a few of the connections. Say, for instance, oftentimes with the Lambda function, you're calling out to DynamoDB to do a put item or a get item or something like that, and that needs to create like a connection to DynamoDB. And if you can instantiate that up front, that's a great way of reducing that, I guess, the duration of a warm start, if you will. Obviously, on your first invoke, you've got the cold start where you're going to have to instantiate all of those connections up front. But once they're instantiated, then you're ready to roll. And then I think, obviously, looking at parallelizing any calls, what sort of runtime that you're using. I think Golang tends to be a lot more performant than others. There's some great documentation and blog posts written about the various particular runtimes and performances. So getting a Lambda function to run sub 100 milliseconds is definitely achievable. There's a lot of folks out there that are in the single-digit milliseconds on their hot Lambdas. So definitely lots of ways to tune them. Sorry, yeah.
Please don't move all your Lambdas to Golang to save, I don't know, $1,000 in running costs, but spending $10,000 in man hours and making your code so much more complicated. Yeah,
you can totally achieve lots with Python, with Node.js. Some of the popular runtimes. Yeah.
So I just want to remind all the folks that are tuned in and watching that this very much is a live conversation. And even though our heroes are always available to support, and they're building communities, and they're really there to enable and help and work with you on thinking about solutions, if folks that are tuned in have questions, please know that if you can tweet at AWS on air, we'll get those questions into us, and I'm more than happy to share them with the panel. Because again, it's really a great privilege. And Lynn, I would love to lean into this a little bit with you, especially because you've seen so much in your journey as a builder, where folks have got, well, there's too much content or there's too much information. How do I actually navigate through and get past that sort of paralysis stage, especially for those early stage builders, right? So imagine I'm 1 or 2 years out of school. I'm just starting. I see a thing that I want to be able to do. And now, oh my goodness, I'm not sure where to begin. Like, I'd love some perspectives from you on that, especially in the context of all the amazing things that we heard Andy share about earlier.
Yeah, well, the reason that I have almost 30 courses on LinkedIn Learning is to teach myself. So they're kind of my own.
I like that.
Yeah, because that's kind of how it started. I just, I had way back when I was working at Microsoft, and then when I left, you guys were the only game in town. So I went from a, career of like 12 years on complete Microsoft to, I never even worked on a Linux machine when I left. Like, I really had to learn a lot of things, and was doing NoSQL and big data, Hadoop and Mongo and Redis and stuff like that when I left, along with SQL Server, and, on Amazon. And I just didn't know anything. And so I just wanted to leave a path behind for people. And, I started out making classes for clients that were vertical specific. And then people would tell me, oh, this is really useful. You should put this on YouTube or something. And I did. And then I got invited by various companies to come and be an instructor. And to this day, it's kind of like a secondary thing, but because so many people watch my stuff, I'm like, thank you to all my students because you enable my lifestyle, to be honest with you. And again, I really try to give back. One of the things that I've done is I've created, like I was mentioning earlier, these GitHub repositories. So very specifically, that's why I mentioned the Hello AWS data services. That is my own notes of like, how do you try out each one of these data services? Because think about, I not only work in AWS, I work in GCP, Azure, and Alibaba Cloud. So across 4 clouds for vendors at the highest scale, I mean, it is really hard to keep up with things.
Yeah.
I spend, time, like when I'm trying to, spin up, I don't know, Redshift something or Aurora or something, trying to find that script, trying to find that sample data. So I just put it all on GitHub for myself, and I tried to organize it in a hierarchy. That is the way I would think. So I start with storage, and I start with setup, and then I do storage, and then I do relational data, and then I do compute, and then I do big data, and then I do other. And I try to do that across all the different domains.
Yep.
So I try to make these hierarchies of services, and it's something that people have found really useful. Like I've done it for machine learning. What is at the machine learning level, what are the managed images like across the cloud vendors versus what is the SageMaker type thing across all vendors? What are the endpoints like the recognition? Because as Felipe was saying, one of the biggest challenges, not only when you get started, but just, I've been doing this for 10 years, is to pick the best set of services for the particular solution. I've come across so many teams or been called in to fix projects where people didn't have this much time and they were coding everything. And it was horrible and it wasn't working. And that's why they called me. And it was a combination of use these services with your stuff, plug it in together.
Right.
But it's this process. Also, it's, realizing that as cloud professionals, we need to spend a good amount of our time, whether we're employed by a company or on our own. For me, it's about 20 to 25% learning. Yeah. Because like you guys, the announcements, I was up all night, like trying to go through the announcements, and, you push us hard. You give us stuff we have to know about it, right? That's our job. But the point is, it doesn't come magically. Yeah. You have to be a learning organization to be the sort of cloud native. And then as a consultant, you have to schedule time in your calendar to learn and then use the various resources. I use the resources from the other heroes, for example.
Yeah, well, 100%. And I also just think that that's so valuable for folks that are watching to remember we are all constantly learners, right? I'm always taken aback if I've got, students or early stage folks that are reaching out to me saying, oh, I'm nervous to ask you a question. Like, well, we're all figuring things out, right? It's not as though we come to the table with here's the picture perfect answer of what you should do and how you should do it. But I do think in some ways that's almost the essence of being heroes, that how are we working to really share the knowledge that we have beyond ourselves. And I think that's how you actually get to the backbone of these super engaged communities, because there's a potential, we're working on it together. There's an inspiration because we're all learning. And it's not about one particular person or one particular service, but it's really more about in service of solving these problems. What can we do together? So Felipe, I'd love to hear from you kind of perspectives more from the heroes that you've been working with on that ongoing learning journey.
It's always a big challenge, and in Brazil and Latin America, and that's something that I really liked also about this reInvent, about it being so much more inclusive.
Yeah.
And so us from Latin America having a lot more access to more information, and because of many things, the first barrier is language.
Yeah.
Like only a few people from Brazil, Argentina, and all Chile, and all the Latin American countries actually do speak English and understand and be able to actually consume content in English. And like the vast majority of the content is in English, and it's okay, but it is a big challenge to have access to information. So I think that's one of the big high points of this reInvent. A lot of the talk already with translations and things like that. So And also with the Heroes program, for us to have more heroes all over the world,
Yeah.
you actually have someone near you or who speaks your language that you can come up to, you can ask, you can talk to them. And I mean, I have never talked to one hero that wasn't very helpful and just would answer and be so ready to help you. So I think that's so great about the hero programs and having heroes all over the world. Right now, since we don't have so geographic challenge because of technology, language and that kind of thing is really helpful. And also one thing that we were talking about earlier is, I
Mhm.
mean, this is a reinvent with, I think Andy said, more than 500,000 people signed up or something like that,
Yeah.
which is insane. I mean, last year it was 60,000, and it was already crazy in Vegas to be everywhere and see everything. And it is expensive, and it's not just the tickets, it's the travel, it's your time, it's hotel, it's food. And right now a lot more people can access high quality content, and I think that's really great. And another thing that was actually, I was looking at this morning, I actually tweeted about it, I don't see if you guys saw, but about the environmental aspects of that. I actually did a quick math of what was the carbon emission that was less this year compared to last year's reinvent. Just like what's how much carbon is emitted for 60,000 people to travel to reinvent, and it is a lot. And right now, so we have a lot of possibilities of people from all over the world having access to good content in their language, heroes for them to contact to. So I see a lot of possibilities in that, and we have a lot of technology to help.
Yeah, and I love that accessibility kind of becomes foundational because it does open up opportunities to folks that couldn't have before. And certainly, as a global organization, the world has the beauty of many languages. Let's make sure that we're embracing them and we're creating content so you don't have that barrier. Because again, I see so much potential. Vlad, I'm keen to hear from you about in terms of learning and sharing and how you're doing work to reach out to others.
Yeah, first of all, I'm sharing the same problem with Lynn. I do consulting, which means I have to be up to date on everything.
Yeah.
Every single morning, I wake up with 700 to 1,000 emails that I still have to read through because there are updates to GitHub issues and new launches and RSS feeds, and it is a lot. It is something that is a full-time job. Clients used to laugh at me when I was going on site and spending 3 hours on a couch with an iPad just reading through my emails. They're like, aren't you going to work? I'm doing that now. How do you think I know all this? But building on what Felipe said, yes, I'm seeing a lot more people joining in Reeve, it being more accessible and opening up the community even more. I'm from Romania. It's not by any mean an impoverished country. We're doing well. But finding mentors for AWS, finding somebody that could guide you into your journey, that was difficult. That was a challenge that I went through. It was very, very hard. I was very happy to see the Kubernetes Slack, which is open to everybody. You can just join it. And so much chatting in there and so many friendly people that helped me a lot in my journey. I like to give an example on this. I was trying to understand Ingress. And after 3 months of going through it, I would not be able to understand it. I would not get the different options. Like it's simple. Oh, you can direct traffic to your application using couple load balancers, API gateway. Awesome. You don't know how many options there are in Kubernetes. Trust me, it's a mess. And somebody in that Slack was like, okay, Vlad, let's hop on a call for 15 minutes. Let's discuss this. Here's the deal. In 15 minutes, they explained to me something that I could not understand in 3 months of working on my own. So definitely reach out to heroes, reach out to people. AWS now also has the community builders program, which is
Yes.
even more open and has even more people. A lot of them are publishing content in multiple languages, which is something that is absolutely amazing and something that I'm personally not able to do. I don't have that level of energy. So definitely reach out to those people. Everybody's friendly and it's trying to help you on this. That's why I'm also working on a container course right now because you all
Nice.
were saying, how do I run containers? What's the deal with that? And I was doing trainings with my customers. Here's a couple of days of deep diving into Kubernetes so you can get started up fast. Here's why you maybe should not use Kubernetes because you're just doing toil. Just go to Fargate instead. Just consider ECS. And I'm getting all that concentrated in a course. I'm gonna be publishing it with Homeschool. I don't want to sound peachy in this. Like, I'm not trying to sell it, but it's a resource. It is a paid course, but I'm also going to be releasing blog posts because, as you all said, it is a lot of information that you have to go through. And it's our duty to give back because people have helped us so much in our journey, and we now have to rise other people up.
Absolutely. And Peter, I'm sure that you can speak to that in terms of the amazing community days and those kinds of events that we've seen in Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah, I think that's how I started off my journey is yeah, as Vlad said, I think learning from osmosis, from the community, from folks around you, that it's just super invaluable. It's like, joining a running club and seeing all of the, fitness benefits that you might achieve out of that or something like that. I think when I started a role at A Cloud Guru, for instance, it was my first data engineering role. And that was really what spurred me on to create the data engineering meetup in Sydney, because I was like, wow, I'm a little bit in over my head here, and I want to know what good data engineers look like, what they do, what I should be actually doing in my day-to-day role, and so I started this meetup almost like a cry for help, and it's just been amazing how much I've learned. In the meantime, I was saying at a recent presentation, the meetup.com fee was like about $30 a month, and luckily I was in the fortunate position to have the disposable income to afford that.
Yeah.
But it's probably been the single biggest investment in my career so far, because like online courses are just amazing, but I think networking amongst your peers within the tech communities and things like that, it's incredible the doors that it can open, and I feel really blessed to be a meetup leader. It's such a huge privilege, in fact.
Yeah, so it sounds like ongoing learning. Learn and be curious is one of our leadership principles here at Amazon. But ongoing learning is something that we all embrace. So I want to hear from folks. We've just got a few minutes left, and certainly folks that are tuned in, if you've got questions for the panel, tweet at AWS on air. We'd love to answer your questions. But reInvent this year is quite different because now we have the privilege of, across 3 full weeks, constant ongoing learning and releases. So I'd love to hear from everyone. We're just getting started with reInvent. What are you looking forward to across the next few weeks of learning? What kind of things? Lynn, go ahead.
Machine learning. I am like, you guys have a whole keynote coming on that. And I've been around Amazon enough to know that you're going to have some good stuff. And this is area I work in, and that cannot come fast enough for me. I feel like Andy was just teasing with the chips and some of the stuff. I know I speak Amazon. I've been around enough now. And so I'm going to be tuned in, and I would say anybody that's in machine learning, tune in because I'm expecting big things.
I think that's unanimous. I think everyone talking about the keynote, and I was asking is, Andy comes up and say, I'm not, first when they tell you the agenda for the event, we have a machine learning keynote. So that already builds expectations. And then you come to Andy's keynote and he's like, I'm not going to talk about machine learning because we have a whole keynote on that. And he just spends 30 minutes talking about machine learning. So, if that's not talking about machine learning a lot, what's there to come? So I think that's what basically everyone's really expecting.
Pete?
Yeah, I think Mike Chambers, AWS machine learning hero based in Brisbane, Australia. We have a bit of a rivalry between data and machine learning because of my meetup involvement in the data space. But I'll give him a bit of ammunition and say, yes, absolutely. looking forward to the machine learning keynote. I think that's going to be huge. I think just the next 2 weeks are going to be amazing. Given the breadth of announcements already being made, it sort of boggles the mind to think that AWS have got anything more up their sleeve, but I think they've got some incredible stuff to come, and I think that's going to be huge. Yeah, I did see that tweet, Eileen, from AWS hero Brian Tarbox.
Yep. Hey, Brian.
Yeah, hey, thanks for tuning in. I think we did have a step functions announcement, didn't we? It was on synchronous workflow, so that's really cool. Being able to chain up a bunch of Lambdas and return a response really quickly back to, say, a front-end application. I think I haven't dived deeply into the service just yet, but I think that's got a lot of use cases. Just going through the blog post right now, you can do a quick little bit of sentiment analysis on a form submission and return that back to the client. So that's opens up a whole realm of possibilities. So that's fascinating.
Awesome.
Step functions is one of those services that you definitely should not be thinking in terms of Lambda functions and containers. Think in terms of business workflows, in terms of step functions. Step functions can call both Lambdas, both containers. Build it first with Lambdas, build it fast, get your MVP out, get it validated, and then you can move and use Fargate containers, either with ECS or with EKS. Start thinking of business, start thinking of bringing value. We are geeks, we love to build stuff, we love to play around, but we have to consider the business value that we're bringing. We all want to get raises and more money. Let's be honest about it. But to answer the initial question, we are just starting reInvent. We just got a couple of keynotes. There is so much more coming. I know there are a lot more announcements and a lot of exciting stuff still coming. We are so early in this whole journey, and I'm very, very happy to see this much improvement in a lot of services and a lot of services maturing. And it's not just 3 weeks. There are a couple of days in January too,
Yep.
including a talk on containers and what services you should use when, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So I'm definitely looking out to see what other things AWS surprises us with. And I have a feeling we're going to be very surprised the coming weeks.
So I'm really excited about this, and we're coming close on time. We've just got about 2 minutes left with everyone. I would love to ask everyone to share with me what's your one key takeaway, if folks forget everything else from our discussion today, but what's one key takeaway that you'd love for the folks who have tuned in to be able to remember? Because again, this is an extremely accessible and inclusive event. So what do you want folks to remember? What's the key takeaways as we wrap out our show this afternoon?
I'll start. Containers are more viable, but listen to what all four of us say. Start with serverless. Do not start with containers.
I'm going to continue in the theme of containers. Start with serverless. Containers are awesome. They fix many problems. They are very powerful. You get a lot of knobs to turn. They are absolutely divine, but do not spend your time yak shaving. Spend your time bringing business value. And Stanley, another serverless hero, said last year AWS announced, 2 years ago, AWS announced managed Kubernetes, the service most companies think they need, and Fargate, the service most companies actually need. So even if you're going for containers, those services are maturing so much on AWS that you have so much more options, including serverless container that you can maintain more dynamically. You can focus on updating them more often. And again, the easiest example is not stressing with AMI updates. But that's not my main takeaway. My main takeaway is we are in the AWS community voices. AWS has a big community. We have heroes, we have community builders, we have user group leaders. There is a lot of us. With reInvent being so much open and so many discussions happening, I've seen a bunch of Discord workspaces for this, a bunch of Slack workspaces, people chatting on Twitter, pop-up Zoom meetings and things like that. Get involved because everybody is so friendly, and this is indeed a community that is super, super helpful. And Felipe will, I guess, continue on that as a community hero.
Yeah, that was going to be my main takeaway also, because there is so much information about everything, everywhere, any language, whatever level you need. I mean, you have basic, let's get started. I mean, I'm even starting a program in Brazil with cloud computing workshops for students. So, like, what's AI and machine learning for you that never heard of it? And there is everything everywhere for anyone, so in any language, and you have someone close to you that can help. And normally people are really friendly. If you go ask a question, they'll answer. So it's really basically up to you to what you want to learn. You have to organize, because sometimes there's so much information that you get scared and you don't know where to start. But ask someone for help. Where should I start? Where should I go? And the information is there, and there are people to help you. Like Vlad said, he's like the container hero that knows so much about it. He was facing a challenge. He asked someone in 15 minutes, he got help. So it's really something like that, and building stronger communities. I guess that's the great part of it.
Peter?
Yeah, so I just wanted to cap it all off by saying, because a lot of folks have touched on this. If you're finding reInvent a bit overwhelming, that's because it can be. There's so many services getting announced, and if you're fairly new to the cloud, then I think a great place to start is with serverless. I'm a bit biased as a serverless hero, obviously, but it's just such a great way to start. There's so many nice guardrails that are given to you. And I think, like the other heroes have mentioned, join a user group in your local town, and join one of those Slack groups. There's so many friendly folks around that can really help you cut through the noise and help you focus on what to learn first, how to get started, how to get up and running really quickly. There's lots of great blog posts, folks to follow on Twitter. We can also recommend you folks to follow as well. And also, I know quite a few heroes are creating some wonderful courses on how to get started with different technologies on AWS. So just reach out. We're all a bunch of friendly folk. We've all started off somewhere ourselves. Not all of us have been, doing this cloud computing since the day we were born. So, just reach out. We've all been there. So, yeah, and thanks so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, I mean, this has been absolutely wonderful. And again, it is such a privilege as a former data hero to sit together with this amazing cohort of heroes from all over the world to share about what it really means to build and what it really means for community. What I want to say to the folks tuning in is to please know this is just the beginning of all the things that we're doing with reInvent, but also we're going to have follow-up sessions at this time slot for the next 2 Thursdays of these global AWS community voices, in which we'll be featuring user group leaders as well as the community builders. So we're really excited to continue those conversations. I'm going to close this session now, but again, I want to say thank you so much to all of our heroes for all that you do to build community for others, and for everyone that's tuning in. Let's all work together to keep building on together. Thank you, everyone.